Hello, my name is Carina, and in this podcast, Break Fear, Find Freedom, I have conversations with people just like you who have broken their fear and found their freedom, whatever that may be. And shows you how to do the same. So sit back, relax, grab your coffee or your running shoes, whatever makes you happy, and let the fun begin. Oh, by the way, come take my hand and let's go. The door's opening now. Hello, everybody. It's Carina again. And today I've got the most awesome guest. You are going to love Mark Joyner. This is the Mark Joyner, right? Mark Joyner is one of the first. He's a marketing legend. And you know what? I'm going to name drop a bit. Mark Joyner is Russell Brunson's mentor. He was too at some point. So I'm very excited to tell you, Mark Joyner. Well, hello, Mark Joyner. How are you today?
Hey, Carina. I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Mark, just tell us a bit. I know you were the first one to do. You introduced you invented the pixel, and something that that drives us all insane. I know it drives me insane because it's like, how do you do these things even work? And you're such a marketing guru. How did you even start all this? Where did you just were you just born with it?
Well, I'll give you a few highlights. I won't turn this into the Mark Joyner tells his life story show. So when I was really, really young, my uncle, who was sort of a legit rocket scientist, right? He was working with NASA, and the predecessor to the internet was this thing called ARPANET. And the ARPANET was invented by DARPA. That's where all of the black projects go down for the U.S. military.
Yes.
And I think it's something like Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration, something like that. And my brother subsequently is working with DARPA right now. He was an F-18 pilot in the Navy. So my uncle had an ARPANET machine, and this was the prototype for the internet. And basically, the internet was invented to create uninterruptible communications for the military. Because if you imagine, you've got like one-to-one communication with people, and you've got a line. If somebody cuts that line, what happens, right?
Yeah.
So, the two fundamental technologies were basically packaging and routing. Anyway, we could get into that some other day. But I was on an ARPANET machine, which was basically a spool of paper, a big, massive, round spool of paper connected to a typewriter that was connected to an early modem, which looked like a couple of earmuffs, and You'd put your phone in the earmuffs. Mm-hmm. You'd type something on there. It would send a message off to some computer somewhere. You'd wait, and me and my brother were sitting there waiting. Oh my God, this is so cool! And something would come back, right? And we were mostly playing games on this, when we were kids. But we thought that was the coolest thing since sliced bread, because we didn't even have the early video games at the time. We didn't even have Pong, I don't know if you remember that, but you're not old enough to remember that. But anyway, that was my first introduction to it. And then later on, when I was in the military, I was reintroduced to the internet and some of the pre-internet technologies like bulletin board systems. Mm-hmm. I was serving in the military where all this was happening, which a lot of people didn't know back in the 90s. They just thought I was a civilian doing this stuff. But I was working in the intelligence community, and I got, computer, got access to the internet, got access to bulletin board systems, mm-hmm. and started selling stuff on there because it just seemed natural. And there was no playbook for digital marketing back at the time. It was just sort of like, hey, here's the internet, everything's connected. This is so cool. Everybody can talk to each other. And there was little commerce because we didn't even have security certificates back then. So you couldn't, you could submit a credit card via a form, but people were like, this is a little dicey. What's going to happen to my credit card? So
yeah.
So, mostly when I was doing transactions, I would have people send me checks, or I would talk to them on the phone and get their credit card number that way. Over time, as I was, creating different web properties and doing different things, people were noticing what I was doing, and they were noticing that I was getting better results than most. And they were asking me, hey, how are you doing this? So kind of by happenstance, I became the internet marketing guru, right? Which there's, a bajillion of them now, and, there were a lot of other people pioneering this stuff too. I was just fortunate enough, as time went on, I didn't invent the pixel. It was the tracking pixel, right?
Oh, the tracking pixel, yes.
Yeah. So a pixel is actually just a single, very, very small image, right?
Oh, yes.
And so the reason that came up was, I was inventing ad tracking technology, which was really just an adaptation of affiliate marketing technology that was there. And I thought, wait a minute, nobody can really track the effectiveness of their ads. So, with affiliate marketing, we can, see how many clicks we got. And then I started digging into how much we could know. And I thought, well, this is going to be a problem. If we're going to track the ads, I need to install software on their server, and nobody's going to want to do that. That's going to be a major barrier. How do we get around that? So we said, what if we, controlled everything on our side? And, so we came up with a whole bunch of different protocols where we had a way, to give somebody an ID and then, have campaign IDs and track, clicks on the links. But then I thought, well, how do we know if somebody buys? And it struck me one day, we had these little things called hit counters on web pages back in the day. And it was a little, counter that would go up. It would increment every time somebody viewed a page.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's going to look tacky if we put something like that on somebody's page. What could we do? Then I realized, oh, an image, it doesn't have to have a particular size. So I said, why don't we make it a 1x1 invisible pixel? Because with GIF images, you can make it transparent, and that it's literally invisible, right? So you put it on the web page, and then I could find out if I name a pixel a certain name and put attributes to it, I can find out every time that pixel fires, because we're serving it from our server. We get to see all the data. There's this thing called the environment hash, and you could find out, where the click came from, what kind of operating system, all kinds of information. Surprisingly, large volumes of information can come from that little individual pixel. So that was the birth of the first ad tracking company. And, we started the first ebook publishing company. We were the first company to do, what we now call funnels. Everybody else was doing sort of like, hey, buy this thing. And then they would give them a thank you page. It was more of like a, hey, thanks for buying, and here's a smack on the butt, and you can go, run off and go away. After talking with some direct marketers like Joe Sugarman, and I learned about how powerful upsells were, I thought, wow, we're not doing this on the internet at all. So I started, creating these strings of processes that people would go through. So rather than just go to a web page and click around and look and maybe buy something, I was like, all right, why don't we be purposeful about this, get them into a buying process and start feeding them different things in a sequence. And those sequences started getting more and more complex. And we started creating downsells and other things like that and different techniques to make that work. Anyway, that's the short answer of how I got into all this stuff. And it was all really just luck, and happenstance. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, really.
But also you've got an inquiring mind. As some people would have just gone, oh, this is cool, and carried on. Whereas you went in and you thought, well, hey, how can I make this better?
Yeah. I mean, in my defense, I suppose there were other people at that place at that time, and they weren't doing it. Although there were a lot of people pioneering a lot of really important things. I certainly don't want to take anything away from, because there's some very brilliant people involved in the early days that made great contributions.
Yes. No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So tell me about, so now then you started Simpleology, right?
Well, that was, back in
that
2005.
And why did you start it? Because I must say, I've been using it for, I don't know, about a year, and I can't do without it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't wake up in the morning without doing my Simpleology, because my day just doesn't make sense. And the dream catcher, that is a game changer.
Yes. I'm the same. I cannot function optimally without Simpleology now. It's just the way it is. And the genesis of it came from, around, around 2002, I started getting really tired of the digital marketing game. And mainly it was, and I'll just get a little personal about it. Mainly it was because, you know how now we have like mobs of people attacking people, trying to cancel them on the internet. And it's just stupid, right? And a lot of times it's just, they're for very, very silly reasons. People expect this now. They know if you post something, you're going to get a lot of negative feedback, and you just have to kind of roll with that, right? It's still hard. But back then, I may have been like the first guy, to get attacked that way. And it really got in my head. And so by 2002, I was just like, man, I just want to get out of all this, right? I'm going to stop being a digital marketing guru. I created this thing called a farewell package and made a big to-do of leaving, and left with, a good chunk of money in my hand, right?
Yes,
which was nice.
Which was nice, yeah.
Which was nice, yeah. So, after that, I was consulting for a bunch of people behind the scenes. And, the thing that started really being clear to me, several things, right? One was I was getting pummeled with emails from people asking me for help, and I hated not being able to help them. I was literally getting like thousands of emails every day because we had enormous email lists, and nobody else had done that, at that time, at least not, solo entrepreneurs. And I was like, man, I don't like the fact that these people are asking for help and I can't help them. That would make me very uncomfortable. And there's no way, okay, even if my intentions were good, I could sit there and, try to answer all the emails, but that would be my job at that point. It would be a very exhausting job at that. So that was the first trigger, right? I was like, how can I create an automated system where if all these people are like, hey man, show me how to get my life and my business sorted out, I could say, well, here, do this, right? The other thing was I started seeing this pattern, and it was that people were coming to me for marketing advice most of the time, but really what they needed was to get their productivity unjacked, because they have plenty of great ideas, but they were just totally dysfunctional with their productivity. And it primarily came because they were overwhelmed with all this information. Now, but to jump ahead, we later started, formalizing this and making, interesting observations about it. And it's something I call the complexity gap, right? I mean, we only have a very limited amount of, intellectual bandwidth, if you will, to be able to absorb information that's in front of us. But we're bombarded with, massive volumes of information. And this has always been the case for humanity. There's been more information than we can process. But with the internet age, it's gotten worse, right? The amount of information is increasing exponentially. So I started seeing this and I thought, okay, so how do I unjack their productivity? And once that's done, how do I then give them a systematic way to manage their business that is also paying respect to all of the chaos that they have to come up with? So Simpleology started out as two actual courses that people would download and print out and all of that. Simpleology 101 and 102. And it was basically, hey, here is a series of protocols that you can follow to manage your time and your life and get all that super clear, right?
Yes.
And people's productivity started going way up. And then Simpleology 102 was the simple science of money. And that was basically showing people how to manage business and finance in the face of all of this chaos. And then over time, this evolved into software, that you use now.
Yes.
Right. So it's 17 years now that we've been doing it, and it's just great. I love it.
Wow. I know, it's beautiful. And the dream catcher, how did that come about?
So that was the part of the first thing. The original dream catchers were paper. It was like, so the dream catcher, here's what it does. Let me say one thing. The end result of people using Simpleology, and you've probably experienced something like similar to this, but a bit of feedback that we get often from people is, hey, I started using Simpleology. It's 10 a.m. I started working at 8, and I've gotten done in the last 2 hours what normally takes me about a day or a week, right? And that's not uncommon. Yes. It's not uncommon because and people hear that and they're like, how is that possible? And I have to explain to people, it's because you think that you're busy, but you're getting very little done, right?
Yes.
You're doing all kinds of random stuff, but none of it is purposeful and thoughtfully planned out. So the dream catcher was a way of sort of clearing your mental RAM, if you will, right? So, we have this thing called conscious working memory, and we can only have about 7 or so bits of data in conscious working memory at any time.
Yeah.
Now, when that gets overloaded, here's what happens. It's like you ever have on your computer, you've got too many, windows open from different programs, and you start opening more and more and more. What happens, right? Doesn't the computer sort of slow down?
Yes, it slows down and says, what are you doing?
Yeah, yeah, right. And then ultimately it crashes, right? Like you're going to get to a point where it's like suddenly the mouse isn't even moving. Well, that's your brain on too much information. This is why people are sort of like, whoa, man, I don't know why I've got all this brain fog. Yeah, it could be because I have all of this unfinished business that my brain thinks is important. They're more or less these open loops in our mind that we need to close. So the dream catcher is a way of sending a signal to the brain. It says, okay, now with the software, we drop it in the dream catcher. And if you're doing start my day every day, what happens is the brain starts to learn, oh, okay, if I drop something in the dream catcher, I can forget about it actually, because I know that, the meat suit that I'm, that I'm paired up with is going to do something with that the next day. So I can unload it from working memory. So what it's like is it's like you have all these windows open in your computer, and it's like shutting all of them down, except for the one that you have. And then suddenly you're like, oh, the mouse is working again. And the computer actually does what it's supposed to do. That's what happens to your brain. And that was intentional, because we kind of knew, about that neuroscience.
Yes. And it's wonderful because I've got a permanent on my phone. So in the middle of the night, I wake up in the middle of the night. Oh no.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, me too. And you know what's cool? We have things in it now where you can like send text messages to your dream catcher, send emails to your dream catcher. So, I've even got it set up on my phone where I'll, call Siri and I'll say message to dream catcher, because I have a contact in my, contact list called dream catcher. So, what would you like it to say? Right. What is the subject of the, whatever they say. And then it'll send that message off to the dream catcher, and then it will add it automatically in. So that way I don't have to open up my app and I don't have to see anything. I can just use Siri and my voice because, my eyes aren't working too well, at 3 a.m.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's very cool. I love it.
In all this, Mark, this podcast is about breaking fear, right? And I know I got sidetracked a bit.
All right.
How did you overcome actually to do this? Because you've done a lot, right, in your life, and you've mentored a whole lot of big people now. How did you do it? How did you not get paralyzed by fear?
Yeah, it's such a profoundly good question, and there are many different hypotheses about how fear works and how to overcome fear, depending on what school of thought one subscribes to. And I'll give you a few different things that I think are helpful, right? One school of thought, in some modalities of therapy, people will say, energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? Like as a law of physics, right?
Yes,
and law of thermodynamics, actually. So, that energy of fear from that school of thought is saying you can't really, undo the fear. You can't like turn it off. It's there. But what you can do is you can channel the energy into something else. You can transmute it, if you will, So I'll give you a really interesting example of how this works on a practical level. So I used to have terror of public speaking, right? Not just fear, terror. Right.
Wow.
And so to give you an idea, so when I was enlisted in the military, I was in the intelligence community, and I was trained in the Korean language, and I used to do, interpreting, between like Korean generals and American generals, and different types of intelligence work with the Korean language. So I could stand in front of those guys and do that fine. But if I stood in front of a group, like I remember when I became a military officer later, I was standing in front of a group of military officers, actually giving a briefing on what the situation was like in Korea. And my hands were literally shaking, and my voice was like, And it was very, very difficult, and it was embarrassing. Fast forward to now, I've had situations where people have asked me to jump on a stage impromptu in front of like 5,000 people and just start talking for 90 minutes. I can do that now. I can do that now. And well, in fact, the blog post that you read, just a day ago talks about that,
Yes.
So how did I get from shaking like a leaf and really full of terror to a point where, okay, all right, let's go, and be able to do it competently enough to get a really positive response from people. Well, one of the things that I did was, and I'll give you sort of a little palette of tools that you can play with to address fear. One of the things was transmuting that energy, right? So I can't remember, I wish I could know who to give credit to for this particular intervention, but what I was once told, tell yourself you're not afraid. Tell yourself you're excited.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Now what that does is it takes that energy because it's there, and so, I'm not afraid, I'm excited. And you recolor, you reframe everything on the fly. And now you feel that energy, and you don't have to, if you're telling yourself, I don't feel fear, and you're feeling it, right? It's not going to be very useful. But if you tell yourself I'm excited, that feeling that you're feeling can now be reprocessed by the mind.
Yes.
And that by itself is super powerful. Another thing I did, I started using, sort of like a pre-flight visualization, if you will, right? So what I started doing was, if I had to go speak at a venue, I would go there the day before and actually get on the stage where I'm going to be. And I'll tell organizers this, hey, let me go to the venue. Let me see exactly where I'm going to be. Let me stand there. Right. And I want to get all of that in my mind, and I'll look around and I'll see it. I'll know exactly where I'm walking to get on the stage, and I'll go to exactly where I'm going to be, where I'm speaking.
Yes.
I'll, sort of move around the stage and get familiar with the surroundings, look. And then what I'll do the night before is I will visualize, like, feeling just like exactly the right feeling that I want to have, feeling confident, just imagining the words flowing out of my mouth, imagine seeing the audience, a certain way, and, seeing them like responding and laughing and having a good time.
Yes.
And then what happens is that visualization is very akin to, there are many, many schools of visualization. Maxwell Maltz's theater of the mind is a very particularly good modality for this.
Yes.
I would use that theater of the mind. And then when I go do that thing, I would sort of reproduce that visualization that I have in my mind. Now, things are not going to go exactly as you visualized, right? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just in the beginning, what I would do is, if somebody was negative, right? Like if I saw one guy who was sitting there like this, tapping his foot, through the talk, I would look right at him. How can I convince this guy to love me? And everybody else is having a great time, and I'm fixated on the one guy who's not happy, right? That's not a good idea. So I started ignoring that guy, right? And I would just look for, visually select the right people to talk to. And then I started taking that to a new level. And as I started getting very good at something that blog post is teasing right now, by the way, I got very good at the skill of being able to change that energy. So if somebody, let's say the guy's staring at you, okay, you can ignore him and that's fine. But what if somebody asks you a question that's designed to derail you, right?
Yes.
I got very good at, reframing that and flipping that. So now if somebody starts to challenge me, I'm not even fazed by it, right? Now, part of that came from becoming very peaceful with the notion that, there is no right answer for anything. Like that guy has his view of the world. I've got my view of the world. We're both going to be changing our views of the world. His view right now is whatever it is, it's leading to him saying something that I'm interpreting as a challenge or something potentially negative.
Yes. I love
so
that.
Now I look at that and I go, okay, well, that is what that is. There's a million other ways to view it. how can I take this energy right now, this potentially negative energy that could derail me, and be like, oh man, I'm going to feel really negative about this because this guy's challenging me. How can I take that energy and shift it into something where everybody's going to have a good time? And whether that guy changes or not, it doesn't matter. What I care about is, what is the preponderance of the audience going to feel?
Yes.
And so I figured out, that you can shift this energy, right? So the audience is pinging the guy on stage, the gal on stage, to see how they should feel, right?
Yes.
So as long as my state of mind doesn't go into that negative energy, most people out there. So like, if a guy says something really negative, I'm going to be, like, it's going to roll off my back. I'm probably going to say something clever, to make him regret it, a little bit, right? Because you got to, it's like, if the guy's going to be a problem, you got to like slap him a little bit and say, I'm going to slap even harder next time. So, think twice.
Yes. Yes.
And as long as I'm having a good time and everybody's laughing, and it doesn't even matter. In fact, I found that you could even say something nonsensical, and as long as your energy is high, the majority of the audience's energy is going to remain high too.
Yes,
and that's a really, really important thing, right? That you've got to get your energy to a certain state and maintain that state no matter what happens, right? Like, even if, like your mic goes out, the slides die, it's like, all right, can everybody hear me? All right, they're going to work on that, but let's keep going, okay? And everybody's like, yeah, okay, right? And as long as you're projecting that energy and rolling with it, everything goes smooth. Now, some people would take that situation and it would be a disaster. Oh my God, the mic's out. Oh, well, I guess we're going to have to wait here, guys, until the tech people get all this fixed. Let's all sit here and feel bad about this, right? Now, let me end this little rant with one last thing. Everything that we just talked about can be used as a metaphor for pretty much everything in your life, right?
Yes.
If you see your life as a public speaking situation, right? And in a sense, it is, right?
Right.
Like all of these things that go wrong, all of these, different energies that you've got to play with, all of the internal states that you have, this all applies to everything going on in your life. So you've got to get over that fear. You should realize that if you have to launch a product, for example, this is, you asking me like, how did I do all of this and overcome the fear? Well, it was similar types of techniques, seeing things in similar ways and understanding that, hey, not everybody's going to be happy, right? But what matters is how many people are pinging off my vibe and being, in harmony with that. How many people can I convert over to my way of thinking? Those other negative guys, like, that almost doesn't matter, right? Like they will win if I allow them to win.
Yes.
Over time, I got, better and better mastery of this when I was younger and I left, the whole digital marketing space for a while. It was because, my skills weren't ready for the challenges at hand. Yeah.
Well, I remember there's one thing that on one of your, I don't know, I think maybe it was Juggernaut Academy that or maybe in one of the mentoring calls, I'm not sure, where you spoke about abundance, right? And that's changed my whole perspective, because for me, it was always like, oh no, if they don't like me, they're going to reject me. What am I going to do? And it's the same thing. It's one person and there's billions of people in the world, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
It's also
Exactly.
that kind of mindset that you have to work on all the time.
And by the way, I'm really glad you bring this up, right? Because, if the universe is infinite, we have an infinite number of tools with which we can play to solve this and every problem, right? So think about this, right? If the universe is infinite, by definition, there's a solution to every problem, right?
Yes.
But it's even crazier, right? To really understand infinity. Now, we don't know if the universe is indeed infinite, but it seems that no matter how far out we look, no matter how deep down we peer, you keep peeling back more and more layers, right?
Right.
So if the universe is indeed infinite, not only is there always a solution to every problem, there's an infinite number of solutions to every problem. Let that sink in for a minute. Okay, so the one you talk about there, that's one of an infinite number of tools that we can pull out of the thin air of the unconscious consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, to apply to the situation. And it's just incumbent upon everybody to, find the tools that work for them and to keep playing with it. And I'm at a point where I'm kind of like, hey, whatever happens, I'm going to keep playing with these tools, and I'm going to find something, and I think if you have that attitude, it really helps you get through whatever you're going through.
And the important thing again is the playing, because I think people take themselves too seriously. They take the environment too seriously. They take politics, and it's like, okay, we won't even go then. All these weird things that are happening. They're too serious. It's not so serious, people. And if we could just make them understand that, or if we can start living like that, then everybody just follows suit somehow, right?
I'm totally with you. And the challenge with this is there are things that are worthy of being serious about. For example, if the country where you live is falling into a paradigm of totalitarianism, you kind of need to take that seriously, right? Yeah. Read the Gulag Archipelago, by Solzhenitsyn to find out what happens when this occurs in a country. And I hate to take this in a serious tone, but I think it's important to juxtapose these. And there's a point I want to make here, and that's, more people were murdered by totalitarian governments than people have been killed in wars. Think about that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a profound observation. And the amount of deprivation that people have had to experience because of totalitarianism, and the preponderance of humanity's interaction with government has been totalitarianism versus the common people. Cheers. And then sometimes we have totalitarianism under the guise of being the movement for the common people. That Solzhenitsyn's life was about that. He lived in the Soviet Union, so went through the post-Bolshevik stuff. So there are things that we have to take seriously, right? If we don't, there are consequences.
Yes.
So the problem is, if we take these things seriously, for, oh my God, this is terrible, what can I do? I feel despair. Well, guess what? You just neutered yourself. You took away all your power. So, but if it's like, hey, this is a serious thing, let's do something about this, but I'm going to have this combination of paradoxical psychological traits. And Jim Collins' great book, Good to Great, he talks about something he calls the Stockdale Paradox. Admiral Stockdale, I think Lieutenant Stockdale at the time, was a Navy pilot who was shot down over Vietnam. Mm. And the Vietnam POWs had to go through some pretty severe stuff.
Yeah.
And he found out that the guys who survived the POW experience, if you will, that would be a hell of a thing to go through. The guys who survived were people that had this paradoxical combination of optimism and realism. Mm. The people who leaned too far on the realism end were like, oh my God, this is a terrible situation. They started getting really pessimistic, and then they would, take away all their own power because they would stop seeing possibilities.
Yes.
Of things to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, this is a shitty situation. Let's all just sit in the shittiness, right?
Yes.
And then the people who were purely optimistic without really, thinking of the realistic side of it, they would go crazy because they were, they were not connected to reality. They would tell themselves, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to click my heels and maybe Auntie M will send me home, right? So, it doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the guys who were like, hey, you know what? I have faith that at the end of this, we're going to figure out a way. Right now, we're in this particular situation and we got to deal with the situation at hand. Mm. Even though we have faith that there's going to be a better outcome, let's make sure that we can get enough food for us all to eat. Let's make sure that we don't try to escape in a way that's going to get us shot by the guys in the tower,
Yes.
And, Stockdale made this really profound observation. And this is something that applies to every situation in life. And I've observed personally, and I think most people could probably observe it in themselves and other people, that it is that paradoxical combination of traits that really makes somebody truly powerful. And unfortunately, this is not most of the dialogue, right? Most of the dialogue is like, you know, the realists versus the pure optimists, and they debate, when really, like most things in life, it's a synthesis of those two ideas, taking what's useful from both and transcending that, where you get the higher view, you know?
Yes. I wish we could actually show people that, so that they could come to the party, so to speak, and realize that it's not this or that, it's working together. And
well, one thing I'll say to sort of tag that is, you know, the classic Taoist symbol of the yin yang, you know, everybody sees that, right?
Yes.
You know, in the West, we call it yin yang, right? But I mean, everybody's seen that, right? So, you know, the yin is the feminine energy, the yang is the masculine energy. But really, it's more than that. It's about all of these, you know, infinite types of dualities that we're constantly swimming in the world. And if we understand that that's the nature, seems to be the nature of how the universe is set up, maybe on purpose, right? Then we kind of accept that it's, you know, playing with the dualistic energies and finding ways to synthesize them and transcend them. That's really the name of the game. And that's kind of what, you know, of course, we can't say that's what the Tao is, because at the very beginning of the Tao Te Ching, it says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, right? But that's kind of pointing, it's a pointer, you know, in the right direction.
Yes. Mark, have you ever found freedom?
Well, it's a profound question in light of what we're talking about now. I would say, yeah, I mean, various types of freedom, right? And it all depends on the context through which you look at these things. So I have been free of a day-to-day job for many years, right? You know, I resigned my commission in the U.S. Army in 1998. I have not had a job since then. I've been an entrepreneur since then. You know, that's a type of freedom, but, you know, I have never freed myself of the life that I'm in, right? We are in a paradigm right now, you know, in this form of existence that we're all in.
Yes.
And, you know, instead of, you know, wanting to free myself from that paradigm, which is sometimes, you know, sometimes it manifests as avoidance, right? People think, I'm going to become free of the struggle of the world by insulating myself in a little bubble where all, you know, it's just Netflix and Haagen-Dazs all day, you know? And, but what you discover is that that's not really freedom. What it is it's delusion, it's avoidance. And that the universe is like, oh, you thought you were going to hide, right? You thought you were going to avoid the struggle. Well, guess what? You know, you avoided the struggle. I'm going to bring the struggle to you now. That struggle is going to come in the form of depression, diabetes, open heart surgery. You know, I mean, take your pick, or all of them, right? You know, depending on how far down that path you go. So where I'm at now is kind of more like, you know, I want to free myself, not from reality, but free myself from the constraints of feeling bad about reality. In fact, you know, as I, you know, get on in my years, I get more and more accepting of, hey, this is the way the world is. I've got to be moving forward. I've got to be creating, because if, you know, if I'm not growing, if I'm not building, I'm decaying just by definition, right?
Yes.
You know, I'll say one last thing. I'm going to quote, paraphrase Wim Hof. Wim Hof, the guy who, if you guys, you know, watching, don't know who he is, he's got world records for being able to survive being submerged in ice. He climbed Mount Everest in board shorts. He did a marathon in the Arctic barefoot. You know, I mean, he's mastered the cold, and he has this breathing technique that he teaches other people. I've used it too. And I started, you know, overcoming my, you know, my fear of the cold. I can handle it a lot better now. I handled it terribly when I was in the military. And, you know, one thing he says is, again, paraphrasing, comfort is bullshit, right? Because getting the best out of yourself, that's the real comfort zone. And how do you do that? Commitment. Commitment is the laser that cuts through everything. Now that's Wim Hof, paraphrased quote.
Yes.
That's kind of where I'm at now. That's a kind of freedom. It's a freedom that comes from understanding the way things actually are and not fighting it, and realizing that you can find joy in thriving in the universe as it is.
I love that. And I must say, well, I started with Wim Hof. That's what I do every morning, the breathing and the cold showers. And initially I thought, I don't have to do this. I don't want to do this. And I'd go for the hot showers. And then eventually now the other day I thought, well, maybe I should have a hot shower, and it was horrible. So my body's getting so used to the cold showers that it's beautiful in the morning. And it's about that commitment, but it's sometimes it's so much easier to just say, oh, it's much easier to, I don't know, go and look at what's happening on some random social media thing than to actually do what you need to do to move forward.
That's right. Well, and this is the thing, in the group that you and I are in together, one of the things I'm always ending our conversations on is, hey, we're at this crossroads. We're constantly in a crossroads in our lives, and we've got to decide where we're going to go. Is it the social media or is it the Wim Hof? And most people are addicted to their phones. They're attached to their phone all the time, all day, every day. And it's not purposeful. They're just allowing forces to pull them in different directions. And, where does that take us, right? We have to start thinking about, hey, if I make this choice in my life and I start moving in this direction, where is that going to go? If I make another choice, where is that going to push me? And the better we get at making those choices about going in that particular direction, that the better our life tends to be. At least that's certainly my experience, and the experience I've observed in other people too.
It really makes a difference. And I mean, sometimes you fall off, because I love ice cream, right?
Oh yeah, who doesn't? Who doesn't, right? Yeah.
So I'll go to Handles sometimes and go and have ice cream because I can. But then afterwards, it's like, oh no, why did I do that? Because my body it's not liking it anymore. And even like random, I used to love not McDonald's, Jack in the Box or whatever. So the other day I thought, well, I had a milkshake. I was physically ill that night. I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. My body doesn't like it.
Exactly. So, go ahead.
No, it's pretty cool. Sorry.
No, it's, on that note, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, because, I've certainly gone through, periods of being, obese to being, jacked as I am now, and the part of doing that was not just the discipline of making the choice, but also there are tricks that you can use. So one thing that was very useful for me was replacement rather than avoidance. So, I'll give you something about ice cream, right? So Dave Asprey, he's the bulletproof coffee guy, right? He came up with this recipe for what he calls bulletproof ice cream. And it tastes really damn good. And it's, you get some pastured egg yolks, some coconut oil, some grass-fed butter. You put in some, stevia or monk fruit and blend it in there with some whatever flavor you want. And you can make an ice cream that doesn't have sugar and that is using a far healthier fat than the ones that we generally find in most ice creams, and none of the chemical additives. And those are all, I mean, depending on what dietary dogma you subscribe to, from my experience, that kind of diet suits me quite well, right? If I, the healthier, what we, current understanding shows are healthier types of animal fats, I thrive. And by the way, I went through veganism and all sorts of different, diets. That's what worked for me. And by the way, I don't subscribe to any dietary dogma. I don't think we have enough information to be dogmatic about diet. There are a lot of people who are like, this is the one true dietary faith and everybody else is an infidel, that kind of stuff. That's a little dangerous, because I don't think we have enough to know. But anyway, that bulletproof ice cream is wonderful, right? It tastes really, really good. I mean, you can make it at home. You can get an ice cream maker, blend that stuff up in a blender, throw it in the ice cream maker, and it's fantastic. And you start to find things that you're like, wow, I can enjoy a lot of the things that I enjoyed before. I just have to be more thoughtful about the way I'm doing it. And there are subtleties of this as well. You know, something I found also is that the selection of the quality of the food makes a radical difference. I mean, there's a huge difference between, bacon that you buy in a store that's got all the nitrates and all the chemicals and all the other crap in there. And the pig was raised in some kind of a horrible environment where the hormonal balance is off and the fatty acid profile is off. Take a pig that was raised in a humane way, fed its natural kind of food, wasn't fed additives or hormones. Then you take that same bacon and then you turn it into like a naturally cured bacon. When the last time I had my major battle with obesity, I was eating that kind of natural bacon, and kimchi is my go-to food. And I would stuff my face with that stuff. I said, I'm going to make a rule. I'm not going to allow myself to get hungry. I don't have that kind of craving anymore now. I can handle my cravings a lot more easily.
Yes.
But back then it was more of a battle. So I would stuff my face with that stuff and I still lost weight.
Wow. Yes.
Isn't that interesting, right? Now, I'm not telling everybody to do that.
Yes.
I'm just saying, consider some possibilities. There's some nuances in there that might help.
Yes. I agree with that, and that's why it's so important to look at. Sometimes you go and buy things, everything. There's so many. Because I'm from South Africa, and when I got here, I couldn't believe that you could just get anything off the shelf. It was the most amazing thing. And when I saw people actually bought boiled eggs, it was like, what? Like, are you too lazy to even boil your own eggs?
I know.
It's really funny. But and then when you look at the ingredients inside some of the stuff, you think, whoa, what are you eating?
That's right. That's been part of the double-edged sword of modern convenience, is that we have normalized the consumption of food that is not really food.
Yes.
I mean, depending on what your cosmological view of human history is, I mean, ostensibly, we're looking at millions of years of evolutionary optimization. Some people might think the universe is much shorter, whatever, but I mean, one way or the other, we know that however we came about this, whether it was through creation or evolution or whatever your view of the world is,
yes.
I don't think any of those paradigms were saying, hey, here's all of these chemical additives, right? That the body was never designed to have that, whether it was designed or evolved. It was designed or evolved to eat things in their natural state.
Yes.
Not to reduce chemicals out of things and then add them in very, very high quantities in the food. And this is why I tend to sort of lean on nature as much as possible. The South Africans probably tend to eat better food, I would think, than Americans if they have less processed food.
Yes, I think the food, I think, is less processed. But also, and most people don't cook here as well. I found some people do, but a lot of people don't. And whereas, I'm brought up, I'm Italian, right? So cooking and food is very important to us, and cooking from scratch is very important as well. So when you come here, when everything's pre-made and pre-cooked, it messes with your mind.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, being Italian, when I make a sauce, I'm part Italian as well. And, my grandma showed me how to make sauce, and it takes all day,
Yes.
But when people taste that, they're like, and you use actually natural ingredients, and I cook it in a healthy way too. People realize, oh, wow, that this tastes different. Like this is, what I've been eating before but people become accustomed to that. And to them, that's the food, the processed, what I think is fake food, or food that has been adulterated with all sorts of, unhealthy stuff. You become accustomed to that, and that becomes your norm. You do have to shift your perception, I think.
Yes. I mean, I made lasagna one day because I was staying with some people, and I said, okay, no, I'll make you lasagna. I mean, lasagna from scratch is like really a whole day affair.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
They said, I don't know, I think they thought they'd died and gone to heaven. It was the funniest thing.
That's right. Well, to me, it tastes a million times better. I mean, all the natural food. And I'll go back, like every now and then I might eat some junk food, you know, less and less and less as time goes on. When I experience, I'm like, this isn't what I imagined in my head. Like I was fantasizing about this, and I'm like, what is this actually? Like, exactly. I'm not satisfied with this. And I think there are a few exceptions, of course. You know, if I saw a slice of New York pizza from Brooklyn, you know, that I'm sure would still taste quite good. But you know, there are alternatives to that. You know, like, you know, now if you do keto, which I do ketogenics and carnivore kind of style with a Weston A. Price, you know, natural food overlay over everything. You know, you can make pizza crusts out of like ground cauliflower, you know, for example.
Yes.
You can use nut flours, and they don't taste the same, but you can get a lot of that same experience. That's, you know, I think that's a very useful thing to do.
Yes, because that's another thing. My grandmother used to make pizza, I mean, like once a week at least, you know, proper homemade pizza.
Yeah.
It was, and it never had a problem. I mean, we'd sit and we'd eat and eat and eat, and it wouldn't be a problem at all. You have pizza here, and it's a huge problem on your system. But it's also quite interesting there too. Right.
Well, I'll say one quick thing before we switch over to other topics. You know, one thing that I would love for people to start considering, I'll give you a really interesting example. So, you know, I eat mostly, you know, animal products, and people can judge that however they want. That's what, you know, works, you know, quite well for me. And it's, you know, I'm very healthy. All my blood numbers are good. You know, my body's strong, you know, so factor that into your judgment. If somebody's going, you should be vegan, right? So, but anyway, if it's working for somebody, you know, that's cool, right? You know, we can still be friends, even though we have different diets. So
exactly.
One thing I found was if I eat processed cheese and processed salami, right? And I just eat those two things together, it's like somebody dropped an atomic bomb on my body. It's just, it messes me up. However, if I get, you know, raw cheese that came from a grass-fed cow's milk and a naturally cured salami, you know, where people weren't adding nitrates, or alternatives. You can put, you know, celery salts. There are all sorts of things that you can do to cure the meats. I can eat that stuff with impunity. I can stuff myself with it, go do jujitsu or Muay Thai like I do within an hour after eating it, and I'm fine.
Yes.
I'm 100% fine. But if I eat that other stuff, my energy drops, and it's the same food, right? It's the same. It's salami and cheese, but there's a world of difference between those two different things.
Yes.
And most people, they don't have that level of nuance of understanding to be able to make the right decisions. And I think that information really needs to get to people.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, sure, Mark. I could speak to you forever, right? But you're a busy person. Where can people find you?
Well, simpleology.com is a great place to go. They can go start a free trial of the software. That's the software that Carina was talking about, that she's getting, you know, wonderful results from, which I love to hear about. And I would love to hear what kind of results other folks are getting. Another thing I'll put out there, my most recent book called Your Roadmap to Money in the 2020s gives people an understanding of the landscape that we're in right now and shows them how to navigate that. Because while Simpleology helps you navigate some of these problems, if you want to be successful in business, it's useful to see the larger picture of what's happening technologically. That's, to me, it's far more important than knowing what's going on politically, because those technological forces, if you really think about it, have had far greater impact on the direction that humanity goes than any particular political wind of the moment, right?
Right.
So those are two places folks can go.
Okay, that'll be in the show notes. But before we go, Mark, what change do you want to be in the world?
Ooh, man, that's a good question. I've had various thoughts about this as time goes on, and I'm less and less wanting the world to follow my solution, right? When I was younger, I had ideas of like, oh man, we've got to do this. This is what we have to do as humanity to survive. And I understand now that I don't have enough information to know that, and neither does anybody else.
Yes.
Right. So I think that the best I can do, and maybe the best anybody can do, is to be the best version of themselves possible, and to show other people, what that means, and to show up as that best version of yourself and let people see that. And, if they say, wow, like you can do this and this and this, like you did this business, you did this with your body, like you do all these, these different things. How can I do that? And I'm like, well, I'm glad you asked. Now I can show you some stuff, right? And I'll show them as much as they want, and I'll kind of vibe with them. And when they've had enough, I'll back off, And yeah, I think that for me right now in this moment, and I will be different tomorrow, right? That's the best I feel I can do. And I also want to, speaking of different forces that you have to navigate, if all you think about is I have to go help everybody else, you start to neglect yourself, right?
Yes.
To me, the best way to help other people is to be the best version of yourself, and to then show them how they can help themselves. What happens now in the world is a lot of people are getting stuck in this victim mentality, and media is reinforcing it. Government is reinforcing it. It's, what Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, you would call learned helplessness.
Yes.
And there are people helping you to learn to be helpless now, right? And it's from what I've seen, the end results of that are not good, right? What I would rather have is I would rather have sovereignty over my own life, control over my own life, and help other people attain that sovereignty as well, so that we can all go do badass, cool stuff together, right? And that's where I am now.
I love that. And I agree with you. If you look around, people are just accepting, or it's okay, it's like, oh, it's okay to sit and be depressed because, hey, you're depressed, or it's okay to sleep in your car, hey, because you need, and I mean, I'm not, because it's a difficult thing if you're homeless. It's very difficult to get out of it. It's very, very difficult. I mean, I can say, I attest to that. But if we could just get together and hold hands and support each other to get out of those situations, and show how beautiful everyone is, and all the power they've got within them. Wow. And so I love that. That's
right.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. And I'm so honored and privileged that you've been, we've had this conversation. I'm like really excited and over the moon. So thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. Thanks, everybody. Bye, everyone. Bye, Mark.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for listening right to the end. Now, if you want to know more about breaking fear and if it's keeping you stuck, check out the quiz. The details are below. Subscribe so you can hear some more of this delicious conversations. And then watch out for my book, The Clank of Chains, which is coming out very soon. Thank you again for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye.